Hello, my dear students. How are you? I hope all are you good. Today, let me start SST chapter number 5, the impact of British rule on rural India. ठीक है, जो हमारा जो हमारा भारत था, उसका जो ब्रिटिश शासन जब हुआ हमारे भारत पे, तो उसका क्या इफेक्ट पड़ा, आइए देखते हैं. The East India Company established its hegemony Bengal after the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Unlike the Mughal ruler, they were only interested in exploiting Indian resources for the benefit of British industrialists and traders. So the conquest and exploitation of India was an important means of capitalist development in Britain. Money siphoned off from India strengthened Britain's economy and elevated its social and political system. So the exploitation of the Indian market and of Indian raw materials supported England's industrial expansion in the 19th century. Rural Indian economy before the British. तो जो हमारे भारत की इकोनॉमी जो आर्थिक स्थिति वो कैसी थी? When the British came to India, villages were self-sufficient units. They needed very little from the outside world except items like salt and clothes. Each village was a well-knit society comprising professions suited to the village economy. While peasant tilled the land, many supporting occupations like carpenter, potter, weaver, priest, etc. performed all the services needed by the villages. गांव वालों के द्वारा ये सब जो है सर्विसेज, ये सेवाएं सबको मिलती थी. Okay, so the farmer owned the land he cultivated and he could not be evicted. He paid a small part of his produce to the king. In case of crop failure due to natural calamities such as flood, drought, the king reduced the land revenue and sometimes totally wrote it off. The coming of the British changed the scenario. है ना, जब किसान जैसे खेती करते थे, अब होता अभी भी है, छोटी छोटी चीजों पे हम लोग टैक्स देते हैं, बट किसान टैक्स नहीं देते. तो उस टाइम पे क्या होता था, जो फार्मर होते थे जो खेती करते थे वो टैक्स देते थे राजा को. अब उससे क्या होता था, राजा अपनी सेना के लिए चीजें इकट्ठी मतलब करती थी तैयार सेना को, ताकि कोई और युद्ध ना कर सके हमसे. तो जब कुछ ऐसा बाढ़ सूखा एक ही चीज आ जाती थी, तो राजा जो है उनका टैक्स जो है कम कर देते थे किसानों का, क्योंकि उनकी फसल खराब हो जाती थी, इतना वो कमा नहीं पाते. तो कई बार ऐसा होता था कि टैक्स बिल्कुल खत्म ही कर देते थे. लेकिन जब ब्रिटिश आए तो पूरा सिनेरियो बदल गया इस चीज का. एडवेंट ऑफ ब्रिटिश रूल. The Battle of Plassey marked the decline of India's rural economy. After acquiring political authority in Bengal, the company annexed the monopoly over commerce in Bengal. After the Battle of Buxar, got the right to collect revenue of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. For some time, the company did not distribute the existing structure of revenue collection. Okay, so but soon the corrupt officials of the company started harassing the peasants. The company needed money for strengthening its administration and expanding its dominion to extract more income from land revenue. So Robert Clive, the governor of Bengal, introduced the dual system of government. Talking Clive's work forward while Hastings, the first Governor General of India, abolished the dual system and formed a board of revenue to supervise the whole machinery of revenue collection. Changes under British rule. With the expansion of British territories, the amount of revenue collection also increased and land revenue became the main source of income for the British. This forced the company to formulate such policies that guaranteed maximum revenue collection regularly. To smoother the revenue collection mechanism, the company brought about some changes. The three presidencies, Bengal, Bombay and Madras, adopted different systems of fixing responsibility for the payment of land taxes. In Bengal, the local zamindars were asked to collect fixed amount of taxes in return for ownership of large states. Under this arrangement, the British did not share in the gains of any potential improvements in agriculture productivity. In Madras and Bombay, presidency peasant paid annual tax directly to the government, so the tax rate could be adjusted at fixed intervals. So, in this case, the British could reap the benefits of agriculture expansion. India was forced to produce raw materials, including raw cotton, for export to England or throwaway prices. यहाँ का जो कच्चा माल था उसको इंग्लैंड भेजना चाहते थे अंग्रेज, सो भेजा भी उन्होंने. Prices in buy manufactured good including clothes from England at high prices. This placed India at a great disadvantage since it was forced into a situation where it lost on both sides. As a result, the cottage industries that produced textiles in India were ruined. British agrarian policies. The British policies were mainly focused on getting maximum income from land without caring the interest of the Indian peasants. The villages were thus fleeced by the company as well as by its official from 1767 to 1793. Warren Hastings introduced the system of auctioning the land in 1773. Before this, land revenue settlements were made annually. Now Hastings auctions the right to collect revenue to the highest bidder for a term of 5 years. The bidding was mainly done by rich merchants who were only interested in collecting revenue and they did not care for the productivity of the land. So this increased the misery of the peasants. The system failed as the company's income did not increase at the expected rate. Hence, the old annual settlement system was reinstalled. In 1781, a new plan was adopted for the administration of revenue. The essence of the new plan was to centralize the whole system of revenue collection in Bengal. A new committee of revenue consisting of 4 members, assisted by a diwan, was set up. The provincial councils were abolished. The scheme suffered from the evils and abuses of over centralization and finally broke down. So in 1786, a rational scheme was adopted. Districts were now organized into regular fiscal units and the collector in each district was made responsible for setting the revenue and collecting it. If continued till the beginning of 1790, when Lord Cornwallis announced the settlement of land revenue for 10 years. So this was known as the decennial settlement to made permanent if approved by the Court of Directors. The policy of permanent assessment received legal sanction during Cornwallis' rule, and in March 1793, the decennial settlements were declared permanent. To ensure a regular income, the company decided to fix the land revenue of Bengal and Bihar on a permanent basis. This scheme was introduced 1793 by Lord Cornwallis and came to be known as the permanent settlement. According to it, the revenue to be collected from an area was fixed permanently. So the local zamindar was asked to collect the revenue from the peasants. Every year he had to pay the fixed amount by a certain date, so he could keep the surplus amount, but if he could not pay the stipulated amount, he would lose his zamindari rights. Thus the collector of revenue now became a landlord and his ownership rights became hereditary. This system was extremely advantageous to the company as it ensured them a fixed and regular income without the trouble of collecting it from each peasant. But on the other hand, if the zamindar failed to pay his rent, example in times of floods, droughts or due to poor crops, his land was confiscated and sold. The traditional landlords were soon replaced by the new money class who preferred to live in urban areas. Thus, it introduced the concept of absentee landlord. This new class of landlord was loyal to the British. They leased out their lands on hire to tenants who further subleased the land. This system increased the rent rate, ultimately shouldered by the last tenant, who was the actual cultivator. Rotwari settlement. The permanent settlement failed to produce the desired results. A new system of collection of taxation known as Rotwari settlement was introduced in the Madras and Bombay presidencies. So, in this system, the revenue was fixed for a period of 30 years, after which it could be revised. It was based on the quality of the soil and nature of the crop. The rate of revenue was high, 1/2 of the produce, and the mode of collection was rigid without any remissions. But it also failed to protect the interest of the lords, although the cultivator's position was much better than the permanent settlement systems. The rigid revenue collection forced the cultivators to fall into the clutches of moneylenders. However, this system was a marked improvement over the previous system, as it recognized the cultivator's right to ownership of the land, but the long-term effects to the system are not very different from those of the permanent settlement. Mahalwadi settlement. In 1830, the Mahalwadi system introduced in parts of northwestern provinces, central provinces and Punjab. Mahal means a group of village, है ना, गांव का समूह. A system of common ownership of land prevailed in these and mahals, hence the system was called Mahalwadi system. The talukdar or the head of the mahal was responsible for collecting the revenue from the village and handing it over to the British collectors. But instead of protecting the peasants, the system increased the social inequalities, improved economically disasters. Impact of these policies. British agrarian policies distributed the economy of the Indian villages. Now, land became a sellable commodity. It created several classes, of social parasites like the landlords and labor. So, this led to peasants' indebtedness, and the system of bonded labor became prevalent in Indian rural society. So, these land revenue settlements impoverished the peasants. So, the method of cultivation remained backward. The British for the zamindars took no initiative to improve agricultural methods or launch. So, irrigation projects as the productivity of the land fell. Famines became a regular phenomenon, but the company remained insensitive to the troubles of the peasants. To pay the high revenue, many landlords shifted from producing food crops to commercial crops such as jute, groundnuts, sugarcane, etc. to increase their income, but this did not benefit the peasants. Only a small population benefited by this new trend and become richer. The peasants and artisans were rendered jobless due to penetration of foreign goods and were forced to become laborers. Decline of indigenous trade, handicraft and industries. क्या किया ब्रिटिश सरकार ने? इन चीज़ों को ख़त्म कर दिया. ठीक है, हैंडीक्राफ्ट और बहुत सारी चीज़ें थी. द कॉलोनाइजेशन ऑफ इंडिया बाय द ब्रिटिश वॉज द डायरेक्ट कॉज ऑफ द रैपिड डिक्लाइन इन इंडिया ट्रेड एंड इंडस्ट्री. भारतीय व्यापार और उद्योग को. द मेन एम ऑफ द colonizers was to uphold the British interest even if it crippled the Indian economy, thus without considering policies on the country. The British policies provided to be highly detrimental to the Indian handicraft industry. When the British trying to establish their foothold in India, Bengal was a prosperous region. The important articles of export from Bengal were cotton and silk, salt, jute, opium and saltpeter. Even during Alivardi Khan's time, agriculture and manufacturing industries were rich and flourishing. बहुत अच्छे से स्मूथली चल रहा था वर्क हमारा और इंडस्ट्री बहुत ग्रो कर रही थी. बट दिस विल बिकम ए कर्स व्हेन द ब्रिटिश फोर्स द सिल्क वेवर्स टू एंटर इनटू कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स टू सप्लाई stipulated quantities of cloth. So the weavers were paid prices that were far less than their usual rates. The company did not allow the weavers to work for any other party to ensure a regular supply of cotton goods and raw silk. The ruin of the weavers in Bengal was completed by the unfair competition from manufacturers in England. So, who were jealous of the popularity of the Indian cotton goods, the industry capitalists of Britain reduced India to an agricultural colony of British capitalism, supplying cheap raw materials and absorbing its manufactured goods. British important policy changed from importing finished goods from Bengal to importing raw materials at the cheapest possible price and re-exporting finished Manchester cotton goods to Bengal and other parts of India. The situation became worse after the Industrial Revolution in England and was further aggravated by the opening of the Suez Canal, which enabled sea voyage from Britain to India in 25 days instead of 100 days via the Cape of Good Hope route. The British company took calculated steps to destroy the roots of Indian society, the Indian handloom and spinning wheel, thereby destroying the balance of the village economy. Drain of wealth. The systematic policy of transferring the economic resources of India to Britain impoverished the country. The Mughal rulers had imposed heavy taxes, but they had never tried to siphon off the country's wealth. Instead, they spent their earnings and enriching the country by constructing roads, gardens, lakes, cities, palaces, etc. But the British used all means to acquire more and more wealth. Deindustrialization. Indian handicraft were destroyed due to competition from machine-made British. अभी हाथ से बने हुए जो क्राफ्ट थे ज़्यादा अच्छे लगते थे. अब अंग्रेजों ने क्या किया, अपनी कंपनी में मशीनों के द्वारा बनाने शुरू कर दिए, तो इनको वो डिस्ट्रॉय करने लगे. The British caused tremendous harm to traditional handicraft industry. Heavy custom duties were imposed on Indian goods. और इस नुकसान ने हमारे भारत को सबसे गरीब बना दिया था देश को, जो अंग्रेजों ने यहाँ पे आके हमारी जो इकोनॉमिक जो अर्थव्यवस्था है उस पर चोट करी. ब्रिटिश ऑफिशियल प्रेफर्ड यूरोपियन गुड्स while this provided an impetus to the demand on European goods. It contributed to the decline of industries in India. The abundant availability of machine-made goods at British government to offer any protection to indigenous industry also added weight to the decline of Indian industries. Also, with the subjugation of India, princely states whose rulers were the main patrons of indigenous artists and craftsmen, patronage to the handicraft industry faded away. India was a major exporter for textile in the early 18th century, but by the mid 19th century, it lost its export market and much of its domestic market. While India produced about 25% of world industrial output in 750 to only 2% by 1900, all due to the company's attempt to make India a milk cow of British capitalism by using Indian resources to support the industrialization of England and by giving it a used captive market. Ruralization. Apart from the above mentioned effects of British policies, overcrowding in agriculture resulted in excessive land revenue demand, growth of landlordism, rising indebtedness, and growing poverty among the peasantry. Indian agriculture began to stagnate, resulting in low productivity per acre. That too, when modernization of agriculture was taking place in the rest of world. So, in the absence of agriculture, education, and primary knowledge of development, hardly any modern inputs were used in India for agriculture. Impoverishment of the peasantry. In both the permanent and the temporarily settled zamindari areas, the condition of the peasant was pathetic. Okay, बहुत खराब हो गई थी condition. They were left to the mercies of the zamindars who residents to unbearable limits. The condition of the cultivators on the Rotwadi or Mahalwadi area was no better. Whenever a peasant failed to pay land revenue, the government auctioned his land to collect the revenue. To avoid this, peasant was forced to borrow money from moneylenders, who in the turn charged a very high rate or interest and made things worse for the peasant. Rise of new landlordism. British economic policies give rise of a new class, i.e. landlords. The high revenue demands forced the traditional landowners to sell their land. Rich moneylenders and others bought this land, and the number of intermediaries who exploited the tenants grew. A consequence of rise of this class was seen during India's freedom struggle movement. Along with the princes of protected areas, it also supported the foreign rules. This rule process played heavy with the village economy. The village panchayats introductions of the concept of land as private and hence transferable property converted it into a market commodity. Land lost its dispossessed peasants and rural tenants were demoted to the agricultural labor class. Development of roads and railways. An industrialized England needed good communication and transport facilities. है ना, अब उनको चाहिए थी ये चीजें. The means of transport were very backward at the time in India. They were limited to the use of horse, camels, and bullock carts. है ना, बैलगाड़ी वगैरह होती थी. Metal roads, steam ships, and above all railways For their own benefit, the important commercial centers and areas rich in natural resources were connected by road. So, railway and canal networks, the Grand Trunk roads were resurrected, and in 1853, the first railway line between Thane and Bombay became operative. So, besides serving the British economic interests, the railway also provided quicker means of transport to their armies. So, which helped the British to tighten their grip over India. Growth for commercial crops. The 19th century witnessed an increase in the cultivation of commercial cash crops such as indigo, jute, oilseed, sugarcane, tea, coffee, and cotton. These crops were widely used in the British manufacturing industries, and hence the company encouraged their cultivation. The officials of the company forced the peasants to showcase crops in their fields. In course of time, however, this practice resulted in a decline in the production of food grains and an acute shortage of food supply. Plantations. The investment in India by British entrepreneurs were directed towards plantations which fulfilled the needs of different raw materials for their industries in England. Plantation crops were also exported to other European countries. Indigo was produced in Bengal for use as a dye even in ancient times, but then it was cultivated more, catering to domestic and ritual needs than to serve as commercial commodity. Its cultivation for commercial purpose appears to have begun in the 18th century. Indigo cultivation by British merchant had begun in India in the 18th century. Indigo was a blue dye extracted from a tropical plant used to color. So the Charter Act of 1833 granted the indigo planters ownership rights in land, and soon its cultivation spread all over Bengal and Bihar. As indigo cultivation spread, its planters started operation the peasants. Now they forced the farmers to roll the indigo. By 1850, indigo formed one of the most important items of export from India. So the invention of a synthetic dye dealt a big blow to the indigo industry, and it gradually declined. Tea industry. Developed in Assam, Bengal, South India and the hills of Himachal Pradesh during the mid-18th century from the time of Lord William Bentinck, the government was keen to grow tea in Assam. Thus, the Assam Tea Company was established in 1839. The company enjoyed the government's full support, including grant of rent-free land development of rail and road systems and other facilities. In fact, the Assam-Bengal Railway and the Chittagong port were developed exclusive to expedite tea shipments. Jute plantation was another lucrative investment as jute was required for packing goods. Cinchona was cultivated for the quinine which extracted from it was the sole cure for malaria, which was hitherto a life-threatening diseases. The other important plantations crop were rubber and coffee, both grown mainly in South India. During the American Civil War, British textile mill stopped getting cotton from the USA during this period. Cotton cultivation got a tremendous boost in India to meet the raw material demands of British textile mills. The commercial crops were of hardly any advantage to the Indian people. They mainly benefited the Europeans who made huge profits. Most of the products were sold in foreign markets and the British pocketed the foreign exchange. The only advantage Indians was that many unskilled jobs were created. However, these unskilled laborers had long working hours and were poorly paid. In fact, near slavery conditions prevailed in the plantations. Peasant revolts. The Indigo movement was a peasant agitation against indigo planters who compelled the cultivators to produce indigo for the world market. Indigo was almost entirely export sector, but for political reasons, they were not allowed to hold agriculture land. They were permitted to purchase and hold landed estates under Act 4 of 1837. Before this act, indigo cultivation was carried on under Rotwari system. In the new indigo estates of the planters, the riots turned into bonded labor. Several economic and non-economic oppressive practices, including torture, were economic practiced by the planters. Indigo production and its exports was a booming business in the early part of the 19th century, but it declined in the 1840s and 50s, and as a result, the profit from indigo production became uneconomical. for peasants. Also, indigo was not a lucrative crop as it was planted at the same time as food crops and the soil lost fertility because of indigo. Hence, the peasants refused to sow indigo on their land, but the planters who had already invested huge capital were not willing to withdraw their capital so quickly. As a result, they pressurized the indigo producing revolts to continue its production. The first phase of revolts in eastern India started in the early part of the 19th century under Vishwanath Sardar, who looted the Nilkutis, the states of indigo planters. 2 decades later, the first sign of trouble again emerged when the cultivators of Saran, Tirut, Mungar, Bhagalpur and Purnia refused to grow indigo, another major revolt against the indigo planters, and their zamindar was led by the Wahhabi peasant and leader Titu Mir in 24 Parganas of Bengal, who provided leadership to both Muslim and Hindu lower caste peasantry. The revolt continued through 1862. The revolt ended when the government finally promised to enact law to protect their interests. The intellectual class of Bengal supported the revolt by organizing a powerful campaign through newspaper, mass meeting and by giving them support in legal matters. So the aims and objectives of these movements differ in nature and degree from region to region. So these movements also aimed at the unification of the peasants, development of leadership, ideology and peasant allied. These revolts never really threatened the supremacy of the British. They were spontaneous reactions to large-scale despotions and oppressions. Their anger and helplessness led to violence that was directed against the immediate sources of their misery: indigo planters, zamindars, and moneylenders. There were several reasons that led to the agrarian uprisings in India between 1757 and 1857. The last one was the land settlement process, which structured all British policies throughout the period. The revolt of the Parks in Odisha under Jagbandhu, the commander of the Raja of Khurda, the rising of the Gujars under Vijay Singh Talukdar in Kumaon and Garhwal, and the revolt of the Gumsul Zamindars in Ganjan district of Odisha reflected the general discontent among us, the traditional feudal elite of the period. From 1827 to 1830, there were many uprisings led by zamindars in Visakhapatnam against the harsh condition imposed on them for non-payment of revenue. The one in Palkonda in 1832 was one of the most serious revolts. So the economic exploitation by the British provoked an intense reaction against the Raj in Bengal. The early years of British rule in India were marked with widespread peasant rebellion. Long before the revolt of 1857, peasants of Bengal and Bihar, who were victims of a terrible famine, rose in revolt against the East India Company, which had been extracting money and crops from them. So this was the famous Sannyasi rebellion. Along with the peasants and the sannyasis and fakirs, there were also village artisans like silk weavers of Bengal, who had been made to slave for the British merchants, and the thousands of unemployed soldiers from the disbanded Mughal army. So the rebellion was led by Manju Shah, Bhavani Pathak, Debi Chaudrani and other figures. So the revolt continued till the beginning of the 19th century. It was marked by daring attacks on the East India Company's offices in different parts of Bihar and Bengal, assassination of notorious Indian landlords and moneylenders, as well as oppressive British traders and army officers. In 1822, the Ramosoi revolt in Satara under Chittor Singh was another movement to oppose heavy land revenue assessment and revenue collection methods. So the Ramosoi uprising finally ended when people were given land grants and admitted in the ranks of the hill police. The Gadkari revolt was organized by Gadkaris, who were hereditary servants of the Marathas. The revolt caused the British much material loss before it was finally subdued. The Chor rebellion of Bihar and Bengal broke out 1796 and carried on 1816. It was widespread and could not be suppressed easily. These revolts did not stop there. Even after a century had passed, similar revolts took place in Punjab in the early 1930s. The major difference between the old and the new revolts was that while the old revolts lacked proper organization, so the new ones were organized by the Kisan Sabha and guided by the Congress and Akali activities. through the commercialization of agriculture, through the introduction of cash crops and the establishment of European plantations, for this purpose provided the context for the Indigo Revolt. It was the settlement of property rights that is generally considered as a main cause of the pre-1857 revolts. So the all topics are covered in this chapter. I hope you all are very well understand this chapter. Thank you and have a nice day.